Welcome to the Experts in Sport podcast, brought to you by the School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences at Loughborough University. Today I'm with Dr. Janine Coates, Senior Lecturer at Loughborough University, Helen Derby, Strategic Lead for Programmes at Activity Alliance, and special guest Tammy and her mum Lynn. Today we're going to be discussing inclusive PE and school sport. We'll take a look at the current situation within PE and sport for those with disabilities and special educational needs. We'll hear from Tammy and her mum Lynn about their experience of PE and sport before discussing good practice and how the future can be improved. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on the Experts in Sport podcast.
Hi.
Hello, thank you. We often start with a bit of a brief introduction from our guests. So can we start with a brief introduction from yourself, Janine?
Yep, so I'm Dr. Janine Coates. I work at Loughborough University in the School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences. I'm a senior lecturer, but my research specifically focuses on the experiences of children and young people with disabilities within physical education, physical activity and sport.
Excellent, thank you. And Helen, can you give us a bit of an intro?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm Helen Derby and I'm the Strategic Lead for Programmes at Activity Alliance and also the Children and Young People Lead. So just to give you a bit of an insight into Activity Alliance, we're the national charity and leading voice for disabled people in sport and physical activity.
Thank you, Helen. And we do have special guests Tammy and Lynn. So Tammy, I already know you as one of the stars from the Equal Play documentary. But for those that might not have seen it, firstly, they need to watch it. And secondly, can you tell our listeners about yourself?
So I'm Connie Harrison and I was in the campaign of Equal Play, and if you haven't watched it, get to watch it.
Yes, definitely. And Tammy's mum, quick question for you. Are you now known as Tammy's mum, or do you retain your name Lynn? Because now Tammy's a star.
Oh, no, I'm Tammy's mum. I'm her PA and her taxi driver. That's it.
long may that continue. So we're gonna talk to everybody and get some understanding of the current situation in PE and school sport. We'll look at a little bit of the research. We'll get some personal experiences from yourself, Tammy, and Lynn from your side of things. And then we'll look at some of the kind of best practice and what's going on moving forward. So to get us started, Janine, can you talk us through a little bit of your research and what you've experienced in terms of what PE is like for those with special educational needs or disabilities?
Sure. So I've been researching in this area for the last 15 or so years, starting with my PhD, which focused specifically on children and young people's experiences. Most of my research involves just talking to kids about their experiences of PE and sport. And so I don't necessarily see myself as the expert. I see those children and young people as the experts in their own experiences. And I think that's a really important point to sort of raise. In talking to children and young people with disabilities, I think the general picture that we get is that experiences can be very, very variable, with a tendency towards not particularly great experiences for some children and young people. In trying to sort of understand why that is, why it is that, so many children and young people with disabilities don't have great experiences of PE, why, many children and young people are excluded from PE spaces altogether, why there is such a sort of gap in terms of access to equitable opportunities for sport and physical activity outside of school. I think it's a really, really complex picture. I think there's a lot of systemic and social issues there that need to really be understood and to be unpicked in order to sort of create ways forward. But in terms of understanding the experiences of those children and young people, I think what we tend to see tend to understand is that inclusion just isn't very well understood and isn't necessarily very well implemented. And I think part of the reason for that is because we're not focusing enough on those lived experiences. We're not talking enough to children, young people, to their families about what it means to be included. And I think We're at a point where we have to recognise that inclusion isn't just about having a child in the same space as their peers. It's about something much more deeper than that. It's about helping those young people to feel a sense of belonging, to help them feel valued within those spaces, and to create those meaningful engagements with physical activity. And I think in some cases that's just not happening.
Yeah, I'll touch upon background for me. I was a PE teacher myself, and I'll touch upon that later with regards to my experiences with this from kind of a PE teacher perspective, albeit 10 years ago probably now that I was involved at all. Thanks for that information, Janine. It's really interesting. So we're talking about student voices and their experiences. So hopefully we can bring Tammy in and Tammy's mum, as she's now known, to let us know about their experiences. So, Tammy, can you tell us what's your experience been of PE and school sport?
Maybe I wasn't involved in PE because they didn't really have the equipment and stuff, so I couldn't be involved with PE.
What did you do instead?
Make a sandwich.
And how did that make you feel?
Angry, but it made me feel angry and a lot.
And did you want to be involved with PE with everybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how was that for you, Lynn?
Frustrating. They didn't even ask me for any ideas of how they can include Tammy in any of the PE. Tammy would just come home and say, "Oh, I made a sandwich today." "Oh, you played some board games and card games, didn't you?" For PE. She wasn't even allowed to go and watch them, which in respect I kind of understand, because then it's not rubbing it in her face, "Oh, look, the children are doing this and you're sitting on the sidelines." But there was still no effort given to help Tammy be included.
There was choice.
Yeah, you had no choice, did you?
I was discussing this with Helen just before you came in the room. And so I used to be a PE teacher, and in terms of training for myself, there was differentiation, was about the only thing. So, making your lesson varied. But in terms of trying to integrate anybody into the session, the training wasn't there. And all I would have done is work with that individual as a person, and, what works for you, what helps for you. And I was saying earlier, it was bizarre because during my PGCE, I was given, nobody even knew I could swim. And I was given the opportunity to teach 4 boys to swim, one of whom had one arm and one of whom had never swam before. And I just had to make it up and get by. And we managed to. But I think that was more from the will of myself and the will of those people involved to want to do it. And we got there in the end and stumbled our way through. My main point being, I probably as a PE teacher didn't feel I had the knowledge or understanding to do anything specific. Although I do wonder back to you, I would have just had that conversation with both of you and starting from a conversation in class really to say, what can we do and how can we move forward? Would that have been a good approach, or what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. All the schools that Tammy's attended, I've said to them, any issues or any concerns, call me. I'm 5 minutes away. I can come and help you, whether it's taking her to the toilet, helping transfer her from one equipment to the other, if they haven't got enough staff there. But I'm always able there to give advice when it comes down to Tammy. So it wouldn't have taken a lot to say, right, the kids are playing, I don't know, hockey or netball. What do you think we can do to get Tammy included? And it would be simple things. Tape her hula hoop round to the netball post so her aim is lower, and give her a ball to throw in. A lot of it is common sense. I just don't think they're willing to go that far.
I think from being around it previously, I would have been one of those who had a lot of common sense and just had a go. And
just think outside the box, and it's trial and error.
Yeah. I think there's probably a lot of
is.
people, there's possibly a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily have the confidence for not wanting to make a mistake. So, I'm not trying to defend anyone here. I'm just trying to think myself logically of the situations that I've been involved in and how that could have been helped. So I don't know if Helen wants to come in there and talk about the work that you've been doing on that side of developing PE teachers and coaches and how that may hopefully have made some difference.
Yeah, no problem. So kind of from our side, we work with a lot of partners, Youth Sport Trust being one of the main partners that looks at obviously sport within school. Through Activity Alliance, we're not experts in every area, but we're there to help and support organisations, schools and community organisations to be inclusive as possible. So we work off our research and insight, kind of what we hear, and in 2020 released some research around My Active Futures, is where we heard from lots of disabled children and young people about their experiences, what were the barriers, what were the challenges, and things like that. So we've kind of developed our work on from that and worked with, like I say, lots of different partners and schools to develop kind of that awareness and that education, and again kind of brought it into kind of recent times as well around that. So we've recently redeveloped a module called Inclusive PE, and all this is not us kind of saying what you should do and what you shouldn't do, but we've co-designed it with PE teachers and teaching assistants and young people themselves. So we've literally gone and asked those questions, asked those experiences, and that's certainly developed the different modules that we've got within Inclusive PE, which is why inclusive PE, why be inclusive? It looks at the national landscape around, the legalities around the Equality Act and things like that. And then it goes into youth voice, like you say, listening to children and young people about their experiences, and the overwhelming response is speak to me and kind of listen to me, don't assume, which is what we see quite a lot of the time, that, they're not able to take part for whatever reason. So that's the overwhelming kind of response we hear from disabled children and young people. And then after that, we've spoken to how to actually adapt sessions. So it's that, how to and how do I kind of adapt sessions so they're inclusive for everybody. And with those slight adaptations, it actually makes the experiences positive for everybody. And again, some of that is very simple around the step tool, changing the space, the task, the equipment, the people, and it kind of helps adapt and make lessons fully inclusive. We certainly understand through the work we've done that TAs or teaching assistants are essential key to supporting disabled children and young people within their physical activity sessions. So we've also developed a module co-designed with teaching assistants and young people, saying, what's your top tips to be included within these sessions. And that piece of work kind of came from a partnership called Inclusion 2024 with Youth Sport Trust and lots of different organisations, consortium around that work.
I was thinking that myself as you were talking through there, the benefits of a teaching assistant and the help that might be available there to kind of coordinate some of that with a PE teacher in that whole context. That sounds quite an interesting place to be.
Around the learning, we have listened to obviously school staff, and the opportunity is there to do e-learning on the Activity Alliance new learning platform, and also the opportunity to do face-to-face workshops as well. So we hear, it's hard to get teachers out, it's hard to get teaching assistants out. So we've tried to listen, and there is the e-learning option as well as the face-to-face workshop option for everything that we do.
But very quick question, if a school doesn't have a disabled child in, will they still be taught and shown ways to include disabled children, or do they not have to go down that line? Because sooner or later, a disabled child could turn up in that school, and then they're starting from scratch. They haven't got a clue what they're doing.
Yeah.
That child then gets used as a guinea pig, because Tammy's been used as one before in previous school. So they were learning as they went. I think every school needs an education, but regardless whether they've got a disabled child attending the school or not.
Absolutely. And, we know there's more disabled children and young people in mainstream schools as well now, and
Yeah.
that number's only going to rise. So the importance of, you know, accessing training and opportunities like
Be
that.
prepared for when they do arrive.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue is, you know, when we think about things like initial teacher education, quite often the inclusion or disability element of that is a bit of an add-on. So it might be like a 2-hour lecture on disability, and then that's it, we've ticked that box. And I think that is part of the issue. And obviously there are, you know, potentially lots of reasons why that happens in terms of the amount of time people have on a PGC. You know, they're often placements a lot of the time. But I think, I was talking to some colleagues the other day, and I use the analogy of, you know, it's a bit like plastering over the cracks, but if you've got a crumbling wall to start with, you know, the plaster's not going to hold anyway. And I sometimes think that actually what we need to do is just start with a blank piece of paper and build it up from from scratch, instead of, you know, trying to sort of add to structures or processes or systems that just don't work that effectively in the first place. And saying that, you know, there are, again, IT providers who do things very, very well. You know, to use Loughborough as an example, we all of our PGC students go to a special school for a week, and they have a special school experience, so they're immersed within, you know, an environment that helps them to understand disability, and that doesn't happen across the board. I think we do it quite well by comparison, but it's about, I think, embedding inclusion, you know, disability, whatever phrase you want to use, into the programme from the outset, as opposed to it just being sort of an add-on.
That's it. I think inclusion is just good practice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whatever shape or form. So it should be looked at as an add-on. It should be.
This is what we're doing. Yeah.
Absolutely essential.
I'd go one step further. I'd suggest that inclusion should be normal practice, not necessarily good practice. It should just be what it is.
Yeah.
You know, and good practice for me would be a special version of inclusion that's even more enhanced. But hopefully, you know, in the future, we'll get to a space where that is the case.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Tammy's experience that we spoke about before was negative, you know, not a positive. Has that changed at all? Has there been any of these things that we're talking about here with Activity Alliance where teachers are now starting to get a better understanding, or teaching assistants are being used to assist within this? Have you experienced any of that yet, Tammy?
No, like I had a recent P lesson where I asked the P teacher if they had something for me to do. They said they did, so I asked them what it was, and they was like, "Oh, you're gonna just sit and watch."
And that's really recently as well. That's a shame to hear.
Like a week.
Oh gosh. You know, I'm sorry to hear that, but I hope that the Activity Alliance and the work that they're doing and the research that Janine's doing really do have an impact in this space and kind of change your experience for the future. So do we have, Helen or Janine, do you have any examples of where some of this is being implemented and it's actually making changes, or good practice that is actually happening?
Yeah, so I think, you know, Helen mentioned Inclusion 2024, and we were the evaluation partners for the first iteration of that, which was Inclusion 2020. And that programme of work, which is built over a number of years now, is doing a lot of really, really good work in the field. So they have lead inclusion schools, which are schools who have, you know, leaders within them that go out and they share those good practices. They help to develop, you know, teaching practices in schools within their broader network, by sharing those practices within almost like a community of practice. And I think there's a lot of really, really positive work that happens there. One of the drawbacks is that not all schools are involved in that Inclusion 2024 programme. You know, not all schools are part of those lead inclusion school networks. And so there are big gaps. I think you touched on something quite important earlier when you were talking about your own experiences, Martin, where you were like, well, I used my common sense and I spoke to the kids and I asked them what we could do. we see that quite a bit in, the research that I've done myself and colleagues, is that it's quite a precarious field. You have these individuals within schools or within community sports clubs who are pioneers, who really, really want to make a difference, who have, inclusion at the centre of their being, who really understand disability, who really want to drive it forward. But as soon as they leave, then everything that they've set up kind of falls apart. And I think what needs to happen more now is thinking more sustainably. Like, if we have these good practices, how can we make sure that we sustain them in the future when these key members of staff move on to wherever they're going next, or if they retire, or whatever it might be. And so I think almost we need this shift in focus towards sustainability, because there are pockets of good practice. There are teachers and coaches and people out there who really know what they're doing, and they do it really, really well, but it's precarious, and it's not sustained.
Yeah, and it makes sense. There's a lot of passionate people that potentially turn into single points of failure because there's no structure around it. Or it sounds like some of the work from the Activity Alliance and some of this education may well be a major part in trying to move this forward. What do you all think really of where the future is in this space? Because it's disappointing really for me to hear that Tammy's had this experience really for her whole life and nothing's changed from what I'm understanding. So what's the future in this space? Probably if we start with Janine and Helen, and then I'd like to give the final word on the future and what we want to see to Tammy really. So Janine, where do you see the future of this?
So I think obviously, if we were to go down that idealistic route, we would have a society, and we're not just talking about PE lessons here or like community sports clubs, but we would have a society that recognizes disabled people as people, where we don't need that identifier of disabled for somebody to get access to something. For me, that would be the ideal. I feel like there's a long way to go because there are really big systemic issues in society. We live in a very ableist society. There's no getting away from that, and breaking down those barriers and those structures which are prohibitive to, children, young people with disabilities being able to get equitable access to opportunities through education. So, the right to full access to the curriculum, including PE, which, in Tammy's case, she's not getting that. She's not getting that PE experience, through to, equitable access to physical activity and sport opportunities. And again, we see massive gaps there. For a non-disabled child, they can leave school and be like, right, today I want to try football, and there will be a whole handful of football clubs within a 10-minute walk of their house that they can join. That isn't the case for children, young people with disabilities. And I think that a lot of that is structural, systemic issues, and campaigns like Equal Play are trying to address that. They're going to the top, they're going to government, and they're saying we need change and we need it now. It's, we can't wait any longer. So I think there is positive change happening. I'd love it to happen quicker. I don't think it's going to. But we've got to just keep sort of fighting on, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Janine. I totally agree with everything that you've just said. What about from the Activity Alliance? Is it a similar thing, or is there more angle on the education? What would you like to see happening?
There's certainly kind of a long way to go, and we'll continue to kind of fight and advocate as an organisation for disabled children and young people. For us, we know we can't do it in isolation. It can only be done and tackled in partnership. So I think that's what we do very well as an alliance. We collaborate with our partners, Loughborough University being one, Youth Sport Trust being another, national governing bodies being another, active partnerships being another. We continue to advocate and kind of influence as an organisation, across the areas. I think for us, we'll continue to develop resources. And again, we certainly don't have all the answers. So we'll continue to collaborate and do that in partnership with schools. And I think one of the most important things for us is youth voice. We won't do any of it without youth voice kind of steering the direction of our work. And that's something we're really developing within Activity Alliance. We've developed, it's called the Inclusive Education Hub as well. So I just think all this awareness needs to get out to schools as much as possible. like Janine said, with the lead inclusion schools, they're an amazing network of schools with an amazing kind of wealth and experience and knowledge. They're not just special schools, they're primary, secondary, mainstream, alternative kind of education provision, and like they hold the answer to a lot of things as well. But we need to kind of further our reach more, and through the tools such as the Inclusive Education Hub. It's a self-assessment tool for schools or further education establishments to see where they are on their journey of inclusion. It looks at, everything from senior leadership to PE to getting the voice of young people, to then looking at the community opportunities that's around. And they're not tested on it. It's a reflection themselves. And then from that, there's lots of different resources and opportunities that can be signposted to. And we'll continue to, evolve that through kind of the feedback and the insight we get. We'd like to do, or we will be doing kind of an up-to-date My Active Futures. So we'll be getting some more insight around disabled children's experiences, and we'll hope to get some new recommendations from that and build on that as well. But it's certainly not an easy task, it's certainly not a quick task, and with us it can only be done in partnership with organisations.
Thanks, Helen. It's good to hear like the passion that's in your voice when you're talking about this, and the way that this can get moved forward. There's certainly potential for it, but again, as we said before, Tammy's experience has been what it's been. So I'd love to go to Tammy and just, ask you the same question. What would you like the future to look like for you or other people in a similar situation for you, so you can experience PE and sport more positively?
I would like people not to think twice and just think a way to include people with disabilities and stuff like that. And I just want the world to change, because it's not great here right now. So.
And what about you, Lynn? What do you think?
I'm quite optimistic to even see anything change in the next 4 or 5 years of Tammy's school life in secondary school. I think with everything, it's always a slow process. And it's never moved fast enough. Obviously, we've got to change it from the top where it comes into Parliament, and it's got to be put in the educational sector. But then for it to come down through to the teachers, them to get the support and the financial help, it's going to be a long time. And every disability is different. The spectrum is massive. There's no disability the same as Tammy, the same needs, like her legs don't work, her arms aren't great, but another child could be the opposite, or, so it's going to take a lot of educating, but also people need to open their hearts to these children to realise just one small change can make a massive smile on their face, even for an hour of that week or that day. And where Tammy's tried wheelchair tennis today, everyone said that her smile has been massive and infectious, and it just took one chair and a couple of people to give her that opportunity, and that could happen to so many children. I think there's so many things need to change. It's just going to be a long time.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I was going to ask Tammy how she's been today, because I remember seeing on the Equal Play documentary the smile on your face when you were doing the laps in the wheelchair on the track. And I think I remember you ended up doing a couple, and maybe you were probably tired after that. So how's your experience been today doing wheelchair tennis?
Really good.
What did you enjoy about it?
I thought it would be.
You were quite nervous about trying,
Yeah.
wasn't you?
What I enjoyed about it was that I got to be included and got to give it a go and play the game and stuff like that.
I think your message there is perfect. You've just said you got to be included. And I think that can be the parting message here, that we've talked about some of the research and the experiences of disabled people or those with special educational needs. And for me, it's coming across that there's educational resources there. Even now, I know, Lynn, you've mentioned a lot of this might take time and finance and resource, but actually the Activity Alliance have got things that are there right here, right now. So there's the educational establishments can go and take part in these courses. There's lots of research there that Janine and colleagues have done to look at the voices of young people to say what they want. But I think some of the key pieces from what you guys are saying is, let's open our hearts. One of you mentioned that earlier. Let's include people. Let's have those conversations and make the effort to try and make something happen. And I think that would be a great starting point. If we can see that starting to happen, then hopefully we can improve it and get it better through education, through legislation, through changes. But in the short term, let's make it inclusive and let's start the conversation. Is that a fair place to where we can finish this?
Yeah. I think that the PE teachers also need passion. If they enjoy their job and enjoy sport, then use that passion towards a disabled child, because it will make you feel 100 times better helping a disabled child and having that smile on their face than it could 100 children that you would have a PE lesson with that day. And they just need to have a taste of that smile. You can't miss it.
I think they need to be encouraged to think outside the box about changing stuff for disabled children like me.
Yeah, well done. I think that's such a good point, that thinking outside the box. And I think sometimes, for lots of different reasons, including the fact, that we follow a national curriculum, quite often teachers think inside the box. And that outside of the box thinking, I think, is one of the keys toward, creating more inclusive spaces. That almost common sense thinking, I think you called it earlier on, talk to the young people, talk to their families, think beyond the sports alone and more towards the skills and the joy of just being part of something and moving and feeling active. Think more toward that relationship that those young people are developing with physical activity and with movement. And I think that kind of outside of the box thinking is the way forward. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Tammy.
Tammy, I think you have. And Janine, I think you summarised it really well. And going back to my experience as a PE teacher, the curriculum put me in a box, and me talking about common sense and things, I did not want to be in that box. I wanted to do things differently in the way that I thought was better for those people in front of me. And that's probably why I decided not to continue as a PE teacher. And I wanted to say, certainly not trying to bash any PE teacher, because every PE teacher I know is passionate and wants to make things happen. And there's a lot going on in the things where actually they are inside this box and maybe they're not confident enough to step outside that box and make these changes that are needed. But I think if we summarize, it comes back to sport should be for everybody. And let's make sure sport and physical education is for everybody. And that does include everybody. So have that conversation and make things as inclusive as possible and see those beaming smiles on every child's face.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Guys, I've loved having you on. It's been great speaking to everybody. Thank you all for coming on the podcast. And I hope to hear from you in the future and see that you've had some great experiences with PE and sport and that you'll continue to be a superstar in this space.
Yeah.
We'll have to have a repeat in a year or so.
Yeah, have a review of what you've been up to. That's good.
Thanks for listening to the Experts in Sport podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, then please contact me, Martin Foster, at m.foster@loughborough.ac.uk. Thanks for listening. See you next time.